Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. We are recording on 3/14. Happy Pi Day for those who observe. And I'm delighted to have as my guest today, Lennie Noiles. Welcome.
Great to be here, Andy. Thanks for inviting me on.
It's also a snow day where you're at, and when you get a minute, you want to switch cameras and show the beautiful view outside your window.
Let me jump into my preferences here and change cameras and
Yeah.
give you the outdoor view, which should look like that.
I bring that in because one of the things, two of the things, many of the things that caught my eye as I was preparing for this show is reading your tagline, changing the world one conversation at a time, combined with something I want to unpack, nature-based coaching, taking that walk away from devices, away from distractions, and actually having a conversation. So thank you for joining us today. Let's have one wonderful conversation. The sort of the thread we want to weave into it is coaching and supervision for agile coaches. Answer the question, who's coaching your agile coaches? Before we unpack that, tell us a little bit more about who you are, your journey.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go way back. I'll touch on a few pieces when we get into the nature-based stuff that I do, but I'll give the shorter version of the journey, my agile journey. I spent 15 years in the agile world. My very first role was a agile project manager. Um, right. So they do exist. That was my stepping stone into agile. It was when the organization I was working for was exploring agile. My role was a project manager, and so they just put the agile on there, and it slowly became a transformation effort. I spent 15 years coaching teams, coaching organizations, and I kept getting asked this question by people in leadership positions: will you come and fix my team? And so it's like, okay, well, let me go talk to your team. And more often than not, the conversation that I would have is, I spoke with your team. We need to have a different conversation.
Yes,
So that moved me,
the problem
right?
is not the team, it's the system, the team that exists in. And guess who creates and perpetuates that system?
Exactly. So I
Give
so I
you
moved
three guesses.
so I moved out of the agile world and started coaching leaders. And so the predominant of my last 7 years, I'm guessing, has been strictly doing traditional leadership coaching. And
Mm.
sometimes agile was involved, sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was about communication, sometimes it was about business building, but it was became leadership and organizational coaching. Um, in my discussions with leaders, I got to see from their perspective what they were struggling with in the agile world. And that gave me a really good opportunity to look at, stand in the middle and look at both sides. And
Mm.
from that perspective, I saw a void that was missing in the agile world. And even when I was coaching leaders, I still spent a lot of time talking, doing talks in the agile circuit at different events. And I would always ask this question to the audiences that I was talking to: do you have an agile coach? And the majority of the time, I would get 1 to 2% of hands go up in the room. It's like that, and that always baffled me. These people who are calling themselves agile coaches that weren't practicing what they preached, that they themselves didn't have coaches.
So your question was to an audience of agile coaches,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
not leadership or team. It is, hey, coaches in the audience, do you yourself have a coach? And
Ex
you found that very few had it.
exactly.
I'm curious, explain the concept of coaching a coach in the context of agile coaches. I think I'm familiar with the path of a trained therapist, and my sister's a social worker, and she's been through the training program and has shared with me at various, family conversations, the supervision of her practice
Right.
as a trained social worker, with all the certifications and licenses. But in the context of agile coaching, how does it differ from that traditional role of like my sister or mentorship? Help unpack
Perfect.
that.
That therapy example is a great example because there's a huge parallel between it. A lot of coaching work comes out of the therapy model, and this is another one of those things that follows along in parallel with that. So first of all, right, so when we talk about agile coaching, right, the majority of the audience here understands, right, it is the scrum master, the agile coach, generally coaching the team and or the organization, right? And it's a
Right.
very, right, everybody has their opinion of what agile coaching is, but there's a core, right, semblance of what the agile coach does to help move the team forward, right? That moving forward, that's the critical role of distinction of what coaching is, right? We're always looking to move forward versus therapy, where they spend a lot of time looking at the past, what created the problem of today. Coaching isn't going into the past so much. It's more about here's where we are, here's where we want to go, how do we get there? So when we move out of directly agile coaching to coaching agile coaches, right? Now we're working with the coach to help the coach move forward, right? What's the biggest problem you as a coach are having? How can we work through that? The ICF says, right, coaching is partnering with the client. So in this case, right, an agile coach that's coaching a coach would be partnering with that coach to help them work through their own problems. And the other tenet of coaching is that the client has the answer themselves. The coach is just helping them find that. So that's coaching. And a lot of coaches need that. They haven't had that experience. A lot of agile coaches need that. The next step from there is coaching supervision. Here's where supervision is different. Where coaching is partnering, supervision is co-creating. So they're
Mm.
co-creating the experience, and the experience that they're co-creating is through a dialogic reflection of how the coach shows up in their coaching practice. So it's a lot of looking internal, where, as I said, in coaching, it's about moving forward. Supervision is about looking inward. And we see, how are you showing up? Where are your blind spots? What's uh, uh, the confirmation bias that you have, right? Where, here's the paradox that you're in. Can you even see it? And so it's a lot of reflection. What did you do in your last session? What was your expectation? How did you intervene? Why did you intervene that way? Did you get the results that you were looking for? Were the results different? Right? How might you have done it different? And so we do a lot of reflection, and we co-create this experience for the coach in supervision to move forward and better themselves as a coach. Where in coaching, most of the coaching development is learning new skills. I hear a lot from, when I talk to agile coaches, well, what do you want to learn? I want to learn new games to take back to my team. But
Right.
there's not, right? There's not a lot about, I want to look inside and figure out how to be better at doing what I do.
So that brings two concepts together for me, and I don't know if I'll weave them together. So let me not even try at this hour, to do that. So let me separate them, and I'll just give them names for now. Mary and John. No, that's not very helpful. Part of it is creating the safety so you can even have this conversation. And the second is deeper levels of self-awareness. So before we go to the getting to the deeper levels, in this world where agile coach is big bucket, long grid, spectrum of what they are, from entry level scrum master to, supporting a, 150 person system, pressure, dynamic, leadership demands, all this stuff. Um, that's a hard environment for anybody. So here you're coming in, maybe an outsider, maybe an unknown or a known, it doesn't matter. how do you begin to develop and cultivate a safe relationship with this individual or group of individuals that you want to say, we're in this together, I'm with you, and we might see some things that either surprise, scare, or terrify. How do you build? How do you cultivate safety, Lennie? That's the three. How do you cultivate safety? That's the short answer question. Sorry.
Perfect question. I get where you're coming from. And you know, I wish I could say it is this simple. I listen so deeply that instead of feeling heard, that the person feels seen. Right? I mean, if I had to put it into a nutshell, that's what I do, right? But really where that comes from is I truly want to deeply connect with the person that I'm working with, right? And it's not just superficial connection, it's being authentic and vulnerable myself to set the stage for them to be authentic and vulnerable, right? There also has to be a willingness for them to do the hard work. Right? If they're not willing to do the hard work, doesn't matter how much connection I have, they're not going to benefit from the work we can do together.
It's the willingness. It's, as we know, the mental slack time, and it's the reinforcing loop of the system that they're in,
Mhm.
that appreciates and helps them continue on that change curve.
Yeah. So, and I'll reiterate again, right? So where the coaching is looking to move forward, the supervision is looking to go inward. And where we start that is by saying supervision is always about you as the coach, your last session. It's not about what you're going to do in the next session. Right? So we get to explore, right? We really get to reflect. And I'm talking deep reflection about how you're showing up and what of that is inbred, right? What's comfortable for you, right? Once we can identify that, then we can start talking about, well, how do you break that comfort level to try something new, to show up a little bit differently? And the work that we're doing is not just about you, it's about you in service of your team or your organization or your client.
Yeah. So maybe mechanically, you'd help me understand. Is that self-reported? Here's how I showed up, or are you oftentimes observing silently in a supervisory role?
Yes, and
Okay.
can I leave it at
Yeah.
that?
Um,
I have situations, especially during the pandemic, where everybody moved to Zoom. I could
yeah.
actually join and watch how a Zoom stand up, a Zoom retrospective, right, and watch how the coach showed up. And then late after the session, we could do here's some feedback. Here's what I noticed. Did you observe this? Right? Here's what I saw with your team, and here's what I saw you overlooking. Here's what I saw you latching onto. So I can do that. But a lot of times what I do is when you work with me in a supervision uh, function, I actually provide you with a form. And every time you interact with your team, afterwards you go and you fill out this form. And it's like 5 boxes, right? Here's the objective. It's kind of based on the SOAP model from uh, first aid, right? What's the situation, the observation, the action, the plan, right?
Yeah.
And the moving forward. And so I give you this form to fill out, and you just fill this out, and then you bring that to our supervision session, and we walk through that. Right. And so now, right, you've had a chance to actually jot down, well, it's fresh in your mind, what actually happened, how you reacted, what you did, how they reacted, why you think they reacted that way. And then we get to talk through that and look for, here's what's coming up, here's what's emerging in this dialogue.
I'm curious, as a supervisor that may not have observed it, how do you challenge the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? I had a solid grasp, and that just went perfectly, and I am well above average. Nothing to see here, sir.
Uh-huh. But that's what happens in regular coaching with your teams, right? They all, the team thinks, oh, we don't need any help. We're perfect. We're good, right? And they just started, right? So the first thing to do is acknowledge that that's even a possibility. Is, is it possible that there's room for improvement? If it's not possible, why bring it? Let's not talk about it.
Yeah. How many coaches do you think actually want supervision? You said one less than 1% are getting it.
So less than
How many
1%.
want it?
Yeah, so I'm going to change the question on you here. I don't think there are many agile coaches out there who want supervision only because the fact that they don't know what it is. Supervision is relatively new in the coaching arena. It's been in therapy for ages. In Europe, supervision is becoming pretty well known. The ICF, just in the last couple of years, has started introducing supervision into their International Coaching Federation, which is the United States
Yeah.
um, uh, or, I don't want to say regulating body, body of
Certifying?
knowledge.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right. So they're just now introducing supervision to right the broader professional coaching field. So part of the thing that this is that I do, right? My uh, soapbox that I get on is to make people aware that this is even a thing, right? The program that I offer is usually a hybrid of, it's a combination of coaching for agile coaches with coaching supervision. And it usually starts out 80-20, 80% coaching, 20% supervision, with the goal of flipping that by the end of our time together, where it's 20% coaching, 80% supervision. And the reason why I offer that is because a lot of agile coaches have not actually had professional coaching. They need that before they can understand, oh, okay, now that I've had the coaching, now I can start morphing into supervision about, right? It's not just about moving forward, it's about moving inward.
I love it. Are there guidelines for how much coaching or supervision is the sweet spot?
There are, and there's a couple of different models out there. I don't know what the ICF throws out, but the Association of Coaches, which is a European, predominantly in the Great Britain area, I believe they recommend an hour of coaching supervision for every like 15 to 18 hours of actual coaching. My experience has been working with agile coaches is that because if you look at their interactions with the team when they're actually doing coaching, whether they're facilitating a stand-up, a retrospective planning, when they're actually engaged with the team doing one-on-one coaching, it's about every sprint and a half that you come up to that level where you're right. This is where you should be getting some supervision. You've had enough interaction. Now it's time to review and refresh, right? Go back. And so it's a cycle that's just a little off from a 2 week sprint, but it's about every 3 weeks, I find, is kind of the sweet spot for what most people doing Scrum would benefit from.
Got it. And that is assuming a certain level of coaching competence to begin with, to have to not raise all those skills up, but begin to do how are those skills actually working, the inward look that you talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. So another question I get a lot that goes along with that, right, is coaching supervision for anybody? And it's like, no, it's not. First of all, you need to be a working agile coach. Right? If you're not working at the moment, if you're between gigs or looking for your first gig or whatever, right? There's no way to supervise the last session that you had because you're not having any sessions, right?
Right.
So you need to be working, doing the work, right? Doing the work of coaching in order to have supervision be of any importance or value to you. Um, if you're a brand new agile coach, scrum master, I would say look for coaching for agile coaches as opposed to coaching supervision, right?
Right.
It's once you've had some experience, you get a couple of years underneath your belt and you've actually had coaching, then you start approaching the place where you're ready to actually do the internal work to move forward. Because those first few years, right, as you look back on your first few years, right, you messed up all over the place, right? You didn't need supervision for someone to help you look inwards. You need somebody to help you work on the skills, right? This is what it means to be an agilist. This is how you run a retrospective. This is what happens in a stand-up, right? This is how you deal with your product owner, right? You need to develop those skills before you're even to the place where, oh yeah, I got my footing here now, my sea legs, and now I'm ready to actually do the coaching work.
Yeah, you're quite generous. I wouldn't limit my opportunity to the first couple of years of coaching. I can look back last week and like, damn, where was Lennie when I needed him to chat? So far, most of the conversation feels like it's been about on a one-on-one relationship.
Uh-huh.
Is there a possibility for group settings, a community of practice, so that you grow the ability for those coaches to coach each other? The make an exit plan for you as the supervisor.
Uh, yeah, so let me take a couple of different swings at that one. Um, in my offering, I offer coaching supervision in two different ways. I offer individual one-on-one where we work together, and generally that goes deep, right? So we're working, right, clearing out whatever old habits you have. We're going really deep. The other way I work is in group coaching supervision, where it's usually limited to about 6 people, right? 6 Agile coaches get together, and I supervise the the group of Agile coaches, and that, instead of going deep, goes wide. We now get the benefit of the group, right? The experience of the group, and the group learns how to do this work with themselves and with each other, right? So it's, and so this, in group settings, it's not advice giving. It's not, I would do this. It's, oh,
Right.
here's my experience, right? We talk about, here's what happened to me. I had a similar experience, right? Or we can ask clarifying questions, or, right? And so, but it's not, you should go do this. This is how you do this, right? And so it's a very different mindset shift from when we're actually working with a team and, trying to give instruction of how a team might move forward.
Yeah, that feels really powerful. Do you have a couple of success stories? Could be individual or group.
Um,
Change the names to protect the
yeah.
guilty or innocent. Like, how is, because I see the potential of significantly impacting an agile coach's way of being, practice, right? Which translates into the teams they support are unlocked or catalyzed. What are some of your favorite um, success stories, for lack of a better term,
Yeah, so
memories?
uh, let's see. I had a agile coach that came to me, wasn't sure exactly what he was looking for. He actually had a significant amount of training, had been doing it, but was stuck with um, his client. And it wasn't so much about his teams, it was more with the management. And he was really struggling of how to coach uh, the managers of the organization he was working with. And that was part of the purview he was given when he came on. Um, and so we started off, with general, the first few sessions were more forward moving coaching. But as we started to shift that 80/20 over towards the supervision and started looking at how he was showing up, some of the behaviors that he were having were, right, like, I mean, this is stuff, so this is where we get into that gray area. Is this therapy? Is this coaching? Is this, but stuff about how he would show up in the outside world was how he was reacting to his managers. And then when we started unfolding that, he began to see, oh, the way I'm treating this manager is not what this manager is asking for. I never took into consideration what his needs were, right? I never
Mm.
met him where he was. I met him where I wanted him to be, right? And it's like, oh, that's and so I still get calls from this person. Our coaching ended a long time ago, but he still calls me and fills me in. He says, remember that time we talked about this here? And it's like, I had this exact same situation and it popped up. And I remember the work we did, and I was able to go through my reflection stuff. And I met this person where we were, and now we have such a great relationship. Right. And so it changes not only how the coach is showing up, but it changes their relationship with the people that they work with.
Oh, that is a great story. Um, Thanks for sharing it. I'm curious of the time frame of that coaching plus supervisory involvement with that individual. Was
So
it
that was a year long.
three quick sessions?
No,
No.
no. So that was a year-long engagement. We met approximately every 3 weeks. Uh, the we met actually. I can remember how this went because I was a little concerned at the beginning. At the very beginning, we met almost weekly. And then as time moved on, we started spreading the conversations further out, right?
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, he needed like that reassurance, like he's like totally lost and stumbling over himself. So he needed the coaching as opposed to the supervision. And then as soon as we started moving into the supervision, we were able to spread that time out because the work he was doing was much more sustainable, long lasting, right? It became who he was as opposed to help, I'm drowning, right? Um, there's always the expression in coaching, meet them where they are. And I hate
Yes.
that expression because if somebody's sinking in quicksand, you don't want to jump into the quicksand with them. So I always like to say, meet the person one step ahead of where they are, right?
Just one step.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what are some of your tells, some of your ways of knowing it's time to begin to change your stance from coach
It's
to
2:30.
supervisor?
Well, I've never been asked that before, and I don't know if I've ever really thought about that other than it's just a natural progression. It's like I look back on it, it's like, oh, all of a sudden we're in the supervision now. Um,
Does the coachee know the change, or is it so fluid that they're like, Lenny, last week you were giving me tips and now you're asking me questions. What the hell's going on? I don't like
um,
this new Lenny. Where are my answers, Lenny?
right. So you can hear in their voice the difference, right? You start hearing things, oh, that's an interesting perspective, right? Where they're starting to now ponder, right? They're starting to naturally look internal about how they're reacting to things, about, oh, what am I going to do with this information? They're now starting to, right, put their own value assignments on it. And so you can see their change. And as a coach, it's more fluid. I'm just changing with you, right? Because it's a co-creative process. We're doing this together. Right? It's
Wow.
a dance.
Right. A dance or a walk in the woods and
Yeah.
navigating the stream, the log, whatever comes up. I love it. I think we're nearing the end of our time box, Lenny. Is there anything else you want to add, or there's something I didn't ask?
Yeah, so you just touched on something there, that walk in the woods, right? So let me just talk about something that's not. And I just had a thought here. Let me add this one thought, right? Coaching supervision is an agile approach to self-discovery. So there's something for you to put your head around. But in addition to the agile work that I do, right? We talked about the leadership coaching that I do. Part of that work I have changed, right, totally. And instead of meeting like this one-on-one in a traditional setting, I'm
Yeah.
now taking clients out into the woods, and we go for walks in the woods and have, right, these nature-based coaching sections, which is a totally different experience. And what's funny is I find that the work that I do out there informs the traditional coaching that I do and the traditional supervision more so than the traditional coaching informs that work.
Let's tug on that. So you're out for a walk. What's different? You have no distractions, no devices, nobody walking into the room.
Well, you could have people that you meet across the path, right? And so
Okay.
the contracting is a little different, right? When I contract with my clients, it's like, what happens if we come across somebody and they know one of us, right? What do you want to do in this situation? Uh, are you okay with saying that you're on a coaching, or do we just say we're on a walking talk, or
Yeah.
how, so, right? Um, what happens when things get difficult and we're out in the middle of the woods?
And you want to run away or punch me or hit me with that fallen log over the
Yeah.
head for pushing on that really
Uh-huh.
tender spot that I have
Yeah.
and I need to fix.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
will often choose a trail that is, I feel, appropriate for the type of work that they want to do. And so it's funny when you say people want to punch me. I've had people scream at me because the stuff that they wanted to work on was some really deep stuff. And we walked down into this valley, and I was just like, they just let loose, right? Not no physical danger, but it's like, okay, right? This trail elicited this type of reaction that you needed to work through, right? So I choose trails a lot of times because of the type of work that the person wants to do. Is it more challenging trail? Is it more meandering? Is it up and down, right? Is it steep? Is it level? But then there's the other thing that goes on with working in nature. The act of walking, right, is very different than the act of sitting, right? So they say sitting is the new smoking. But when you're walking, there's that step by step, actually you're doing what's called crossing the midline. And so it's activating both sides of the brain, which encourages connection between the two sides. This is what the whole concept of EMDR, rapid eye movement desensitization therapy is based on. Is that right, crossing the midline
Yeah.
between the two
Yeah.
sides. Your every foot strike creates a hydraulic wave that brings more blood to the brain, carrying more oxygen because you're out moving, which is the air you're breathing is also filled with the terpenes and phenosides that the plants are giving off, which
Right.
those chemicals have an impact on your brain. You're walking generally side by side, which activates mirror neurons. And you're in a novel situation, which then opens up a whole nother side of your brain. So all of these things combined allows the coaching experience to go to different places that you can't go in a traditional setting. So that's just an aside there, right?
It's a whole nother conversation that you and I need to take a walk. Us two need to just um, get out and walk. Um,
Awesome.
so you said that informs the other stuff more than the other direction. How do you bring
Yeah.
some of that stuff in? And you're encouraging your clients to get the walking treadmill or to actually juggle while we're having a conversation to do get out of whatever stuck
Right.
body
So so my
wave you're
my
in.
my catch line for my um nature-based coaching work is we walk, you talk, I listen, and the world changes. Right? So that I listen, right, is the crucial part there, right? I tell my clients, I give up when we go into the woods, I give up my role as a coach. I let nature do the coaching. I become the accompanitor or the one who walks with. Right? It's taking that piece, that deeper listening, and being the one who's with the client that I bring back into the traditional rather than the person who's doing more talking. I do more listening.
Love it. I also saw in doing some research that you love serious play, the Lego variety. Is that
Yeah.
still a part of your, um, I want to say practice
Yeah.
toolbox? I don't know
I
what the
used to
right
do a
word
lot
is.
more of that with teams. When I would go into do organizational coaching, I would a lot of times do the Lego serious play because it's a great way to break
Oh,
with barriers. It's thinking with your hands. Um, and I actually take pieces of that and I incorporate them into my other coaching methodologies. I do a lot of constellation work
hmm.
or even in the nature-based coaching, right? We get stuck on an issue. Let's sit down here on the side of the trail and make stick figures with pine cones and twigs and in the mud. And right now we have a three-dimensional model we can talk about, right? So, and occasionally I'll do that in my traditional coaching, not so often in the supervision, but on a rare occasion it does come up. It does come up a lot when I'm working one-on-one coaching, where it's like, what if we put this into a three-dimensional perspective? What does that look like?
It sounds to me like you prefer in person, in nature, over in Zoom.
Yes,
How have you made this virtual world um, effective for how you want to change the world one conversation at a time? What are some things that you have found useful?
So yeah, so my preference is definitely to do the walk in the woods, right? That's my um I feel like my natural strength. That said, right, we can't all be walking in the woods. A lot of times when I'm doing the Zoom work or telephone, I'll actually go out into my backyard and I will walk in this. I kind of have a walking path that goes around my backyard through some trees, up and down a little slope. And so I get to then tap into that as I'm working with a client over technology. There are
Camera
times where,
on?
what's that?
Both cameras on or audio only?
Audio only usually with those. I find that with my coaching, with a few exceptions, I get more out of with just the audio than I do with the video. And occasionally I'll have the client go and walk in, a local park or whatever. And so we're both outdoors walking, although we're doing coaching supervision or we're coaching agile coaches or we're coaching leaders, right?
Yeah.
It's all the same stuff. And it's just, I just being outside gives me um, more grist for the mill, more little subtle nuances to pull from, more observations. It's like, oh, an owl's hooting up in that tree. That's interesting. How does that inform this conversation that we're having? Right?
Yeah.
Or if they're out walking, or it's like, I heard that your footsteps just change on the pavement. You were, it was real crunchy a minute ago, and now it's like I'm barely hearing them. Right? What changed for you? Right? So it's those little idiosyncrasies that come into the conversation, and that again becomes to, right, being a little more hyper aware. Right? It's like I'm trying to listen to who's there and their environment, how that's informing how they're showing up.
And really being present in the moment,
Absolutely.
which is hard when there's video off or 1,000 distractions and pings and stuff going
Right.
on.
You know,
Oh, Lennie.
and when I do group supervision, right, it's traditional, right? I mean, there are six people
Yeah,
up on the screen,
right.
because you need that. You need to be able to see everybody and make sure people aren't, checking out, or it's like, oh, this person, right? You can just see something happened in their face, invite them into the conversation, right? What wisdom do they have to offer? So it's we have to adapt, right? I'd love to be out in the woods all the time, but eventually I got to come home and face whatever's here.
If people want to carry on the conversation, what is the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you, Lennie Noiles?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, which is my name, LennieNoiles.com, you can explore all the different things I do there on my homepage. There's different links to my Agile coaching supervision, the outdoor work I do, the leadership coaching I do, and somewhere in there's a contact page. You can reach out. I'm always happy to talk about this. I'm always happy to help people explore their journey. I want to see people reach their potential. That's my lot in life.
I can see how much joy it brings you. I want to thank you for your time, Lennie, and also to our listening audience. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a review or rating on your platform of choice. First time tuning in, subscribe, get the next episode. And if you want to join the journey, have a conversation, hop onto our Discord server for some text messaging, but it also has an audio channel if you want to take a walk in the woods. I might try that. Finally, support from listeners just like you help us cover our podcast and hosting costs. So check the show notes, figure out how to become a patron at a certain price point, less than a cup of coffee a month. You'll get some really cool swag that Jay's been producing. So thanks again, Lennie Noiles. And until next time, this is the Agile Uprising podcast.